Some truths are too dangerous for headlines, too deep for news bulletins, and too complex for the noise of social media. Tonight, we step beyond the slogans, beyond the propaganda, into the shadowed corridors where history, power, and belief collide. For decades, two nations have stood locked in a silent storm, not always on the battlefield, but always in the mind of the world. This is not just a story of politics or war. It is the anatomy of a tension that shapes the fate of millions. To understand it, you must be willing to look past the smoke and into the fire. Because once you hear what you are about to hear, you will never see the Middle East or the world in the same way again. The geopolitical rivalry between Iran and Israel is one of the most defining features of Middle Eastern politics today, shaping alliances, conflicts, and the broader balance of power in the region. Both nations see themselves as central players with distinct visions for the region's future, and these visions stand in stark opposition to one another. Israel views itself as a democratic and technologically advanced state, seeking security and recognition in a volatile environment, while Iran positions itself as a revolutionary Islamic power, resisting what it sees as Western influence and defending the rights of oppressed peoples, particularly Palestinians. This rivalry extends beyond direct relations and plays out in the way each country builds strategic alliances. Israel has deepened its ties with countries such as the United States and, more recently, several Arab nations through agreements like the Abraham Accords. These partnerships aim to strengthen Israel's regional security and counter threats from Iran's growing influence. On the other hand, Iran has cultivated relationships with a network of allies and proxy groups, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, certain factions in Iraq, and the Syrian government, in an effort to expand its reach and counter Israel's presence. The competition for influence is not confined to military or political spheres, but also involves ideological narratives. Israel emphasizes stability through technological innovation, security cooperation, and diplomacy, portraying Iran as a destabilizing actor in the region. Iran counters this by framing itself as the defender of resistance against what it considers unjust occupation and foreign interference, casting Israel as part of a broader Western agenda. These opposing narratives fuel mistrust and make meaningful dialogue extremely difficult. Geography further intensifies the rivalry. While Iran and Israel do not share borders, their influence overlaps in several key areas of conflict, such as Syria and Lebanon, where their respective allies often find themselves in direct opposition. These proxy arenas allow both countries to confront each other indirectly, but they also heighten the risk of escalation into open conflict. Ultimately, the geopolitical rivalry between Iran and Israel is not simply a bilateral dispute, but a competition over the future order of the Middle East. Both see themselves as guardians of their own ideological and strategic visions, and both are willing to invest heavily, politically, economically, and militarily, to secure their place in the region. This zero-sum perception ensures that their rivalry continues to influence regional politics, often drawing in other nations and shaping the course of conflicts far beyond their own borders. The geopolitical rivalry between Iran and Israel is rooted in fundamentally different visions for the Middle East with each nation perceiving the other as a major obstacle to its strategic goals. Israel sees itself as a secure, technologically advanced democracy, seeking legitimacy and lasting stability in a volatile environment, while Iran frames itself as a revolutionary Islamic power determined to resist Western influence and challenge what it considers unjust domination, particularly in defense of the Palestinian cause. These contrasting self-signals fuel a competition that extends well beyond their own borders, influencing alliances, shaping conflicts, and determining the balance of power in the region. This rivalry is not fought on direct battlefields between the two nations, as they share no common border, but rather through influence over third-party states and non-state actors. Israel has worked to strengthen ties with the United States, and in recent years with several Arab nations through agreements like the Abraham Accords, which focus on security cooperation, trade, and intelligence sharing. These partnerships aim to counterbalance Iran's influence, which Israel views as a destabilizing force. In contrast, Iran has built a network of allies and proxies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, armed factions in Iraq, and strong ties with the Syrian government, allowing it to project power across the region without direct confrontation. Ideology also plays a critical role in this rivalry. Israel promotes a vision of regional stability based on diplomatic normalization and technological progress, while portraying Iran as a persistent threat due to its military expansion and support for armed groups. Iran, on the other hand, positions itself as the vanguard of resistance, accusing Israel of occupation and oppression, and framing its opposition as part of a moral and religious duty to stand against injustice. These conflicting narratives deepen mistrust and make compromise far more difficult, as each side views concessions as strategic losses. Regional geography further complicates the situation, as areas like Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza have become arenas where the two powers indirectly confront one another. Military strikes, intelligence operations, and proxy clashes in these locations act as pressure points in their broader competition, with the risk of escalation always present. The geopolitical rivalry between Iran and Israel is therefore not a simple bilateral dispute, but a multifaceted struggle for influence over the Middle East's political, military, and ideological future, ensuring that their conflict remains a central force shaping the region's trajectory for years to come. The nuclear issue stands at the heart of the modern tension between Iran and Israel, representing one of the most sensitive and dangerous aspects of their rivalry. Israel views the prospect of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons capability as an existential threat, arguing that a nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Middle East and pose a direct risk to its survival. From Israel's perspective, Iran's repeated calls for resistance against Israel, combined with its support for groups hostile to the Israeli state, make the idea of Tehran possessing such weapons unacceptable. As a result, Israel has consistently pushed for strict measures to prevent Iran from developing any capacity that could be diverted toward a nuclear weapons program, including sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and even covert operations. Iran, on the other hand, maintains that its nuclear program is entirely peaceful and intended for civilian purposes, such as energy production and medical research. It cites its right, under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, to develop nuclear technology for these uses, arguing that its program has been unfairly politicized by Israel and its allies. Iranian leaders often point out that Israel itself is widely believed to possess a nuclear arsenal, despite never officially confirming it, and that this double standard undermines the legitimacy of the criticism directed at Tehran. Ariana writes, "We know that in our country, no individual nor action of a group can be seen as insular or domestic. Iranian leaders often point out that Israel itself is widely believed to possess a nuclear arsenal, despite its prerogatives to control natural gas." James McAfee, Iran's international efforts to address the issue have been ongoing for decades, with the most significant development being the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. This agreement placed strict limits on Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief, and it was supported by major world powers. Israel, however, opposed the deal, arguing that it did not go far enough to prevent Iran from eventually acquiring nuclear weapons, and that it failed to address Iran's missile program and regional activities. The U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018, followed by renewed sanctions, reignited tensions and led Iran to gradually roll back its compliance with the agreement's restrictions. The nuclear issue is not only a matter of technology and capability, but also one of deep mistrust. Israel fears that any progress in Iran's nuclear program could one day be turned toward weaponization, while Iran sees Israel's opposition as part of a broader effort to limit its sovereignty and regional influence. This stalemate ensures that the nuclear question will remain a flashpoint in their relationship, with the potential for any escalation to have far-reaching consequences for the stability of the entire Middle East. The tension between Iran and Israel is often played out indirectly through a network of proxy conflicts and regional influence, where both nations support opposing sides in disputes across the Middle East. This strategy allows them to confront each other without engaging in direct warfare, yet it keeps the conflict alive in multiple arenas, often intensifying instability. Iran has built strong relationships with groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, certain Palestinian factions in Gaza, and Shia militias in Iraq and Yemen. These alliances serve as both a deterrent against potential Israeli action and as a way to project Iranian power beyond its borders. By supporting these groups with funding, weapons, and training, Iran maintains a presence close to Israel's borders, creating ongoing security challenges for the Israeli state. Israel, in response, has formed partnerships with regional governments and movements that oppose Iranian influence. It has conducted targeted military operations in Syria to prevent advanced weapons from reaching Hezbollah, disrupted supply routes, and used intelligence networks to counter Iranian activities. Israel's close security cooperation with countries such as the United States and some Gulf states also reflects a broader strategy to contain Iran's reach and diminish the effectiveness of its proxies. The rise of normalization agreements between Israel and certain Arab countries further shifts the balance as these alliances strengthen the anti-Iran bloc in the region. These proxy conflicts are not limited to military engagements, but also extend to political influence and public opinion. Iran presents its support for resistance groups as part of a moral obligation to defend oppressed peoples, particularly Palestinians, portraying itself as the leader of a broader movement against occupation and foreign dominance. Israel, in turn, frames Iran's network of proxies as terrorist organizations that destabilize governments, target civilians, and prevent peace efforts from succeeding. These competing narratives not only justify each side's actions to their domestic audiences, but also shape international perceptions, influencing the policies of global powers toward the region. The result is a prolonged and multi-layered struggle where battles in Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, or even Yemen can be seen as part of the broader Iran resurrection. Each proxy conflict has the potential to escalate into a larger confrontation, especially when one side perceives the other as crossing critical red lines. By operating through proxies, both Iran and Israel maintain plausible deniability in certain situations, but the underlying hostility remains constant, ensuring that the rivalry continues to fuel unrest and shape the political and security landscape of the Middle East. International involvement in the Iran-Iranian tension has played a decisive role in shaping the trajectory of their rivalry, often amplifying or moderating the intensity of their confrontations. The United States has been Israel's most significant ally, providing political backing, military aid, and diplomatic support in international forums. Washington views Iran as a destabilizing force in the Middle East, largely because of its nuclear ambitions, missile programs, and support for armed groups that oppose U.S. interests and allies. Consequently, the U.S. has maintained extensive sanctions on Iran and has worked closely with Israel and other regional partners to counter Tehran's influence. This alignment has further deepened Iran's suspicion of Israel, framing the conflict as part of a broader struggle against American dominance in the region. Russia plays a different but equally influential role. As a key ally of the Syrian government, Russia has engaged with both Iran and Israel to protect its own strategic interests in Syria. While it cooperates with Iran in supporting the Assad regime, it has also coordinated with Israel to avoid direct military clashes between their forces in Syrian territory. This balancing act reflects Moscow's desire to maintain relationships with both sides, positioning itself as a power broker while advancing its regional goals. European powers have also been involved, particularly through their role in the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran. Nations such as the United Kingdom, France, and Germany view the preservation of the deal as essential to preventing nuclear escalation and ensuring regional stability. Their diplomatic efforts often aim to reduce tensions between Iran and Israel indirectly by keeping the nuclear issue under control. However, their influence is limited by the broader geopolitical contest and by the breakdown of the agreement following the U.S. withdrawal. Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have increasingly aligned with Israel due to their shared concerns over Iran's regional activity. This alignment has brought about unprecedented cooperation in intelligence and security matters, further isolating Iran and increasing the sense of encirclement that fuels its defensive and aggressive postures. The involvement of these international actors means that the Iran-Israel tension is never purely bilateral. Every move by one side is interpreted through a complex web of global alliances and rivalries, making resolution far more complicated. External powers, driven by their own strategic interests, have the ability to escalate the conflict through military and political backing, or to reduce hostilities through mediation and diplomatic pressure, ensuring that the tension remains a central issue in both regional and global politics. The human impact of the Iran residential tension is profound, extending far beyond political rhetoric and military strategy, touching the lives of ordinary people across the Middle East. Civilians often bear the brunt of the instability created by this rivalry, facing threats to their safety, livelihoods, and future prospects. In areas where proxy conflicts unfold, such as Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, and Yemen, communities experience displacement, destruction of infrastructure, and loss of access to essential services. Families are uprooted from their homes, children are deprived of consistent education, and basic health care becomes difficult to access due to ongoing violence and economic strain. The fear of sudden escalation looms over daily life, leaving people in a constant state of uncertainty. Economic hardship is another consequence that ripples outward from the tension. Sanctions on Iran, aimed at curbing its regional activities and nuclear ambitions, have severely impacted its population, leading to inflation, unemployment, and shortages of vital goods. Similarly, areas affected by Israeli military actions or blockades, particularly in Gaza, face high levels of poverty and dependency on humanitarian aid. While these measures are often justified by governments as necessary for security or political leverage, they contribute to cycles of suffering that disproportionately affect civilians rather than political leaders or armed actors. The human toll also includes psychological effects. Years of instability have created generational trauma in many communities, where young people grow up knowing little other than conflict and political hostility. This environment fosters distrust and resentment, making reconciliation between peoples even more challenging. Propaganda and polarized narratives on both sides often reinforce stereotypes and hostility, reducing opportunities for dialogue at the grassroots level. Despite these challenges, there are individuals and organizations working tirelessly to promote peace, understanding, and humanitarian relief. Cross-cultural initiatives, educational programs, and non-governmental organizations aim to bridge divides and offer support to those affected by the conflict. However, their efforts are often overshadowed by the larger political and military dynamics that dominate the headlines. The path forward inevitably requires addressing the human dimension of the Iran-Russia rivalry without improving the lives of those caught in the crossfire. By ensuring security, economic stability, and opportunities for growth, any political agreement will struggle to take hold. True resolution depends not only on high-level diplomacy, but also on creating conditions where ordinary people can live without fear, rebuild their communities, and envision a future defined by cooperation rather than conflict. The stakes are not just political, they are deeply human, making the pursuit of peace an urgent moral responsibility. The Iran-Israel tension is not the product of a single dispute, nor is it confined to the borders of the two nations. It is a complex web of history, ideology, power struggles, and competing visions for the Middle East, shaped by decades of shifting alliances, proxy conflicts, and deep mistrust. From the historical break in relations after the 1979 Iranian Revolution to the nuclear question, the shadow wars through proxies, the influence of powerful international actors, and the heavy toll on civilian lives, every layer of this rivalry adds to its complexity. Yet, beneath the politics and the military strategies lies a simple truth. The cost of this conflict is borne most heavily by the ordinary people who live in its shadow. Understanding the roots and realities of this tension is the first step toward imagining a future where dialogue replaces hostility and where stability is built on trust rather than fear. Peace will not come easily, but it remains the only path that offers hope to the millions affected by this enduring struggle. I wish you the very best as you share this important message with the world. May your work bring clarity to complex issues, spark meaningful conversations, and inspire people to think beyond divisions. Your dedication to presenting truth with balance and depth is a rare and valuable contribution. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your effort, and may your journey ahead be filled with insight, impact, and the satisfaction of knowing that your voice can help shape a better tomorrow.